Hello, everyone. I think we are live again in the Low Carb Lifestyle Hub and on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you, and I'm sure I don't need to introduce this lady to most of you. She is phenomenal and just an incredible woman bringing so much knowledge, insight and hope into the space, particularly around migraines. So Dr. Angela Stanton, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tracy. Really nice chatting with you again.
Oh, I know. I was very excited. Looking forward to seeing you again. It's just a short little chat, obviously, to, encourage people to sign up to the summit to listen to your talk within the summit. So you are definitely well known in the space for your work around migraines. But for people who may not have come across you before, what led you down, particularly into the low carb space?
Well, that's a very long story. So I'm a migraine. I've been a migraine since I was about maybe 10, 11. I don't exactly remember, but basically all my life. And what led me to the low carb space is completely accidental. Because when I quit my academic job and I decided to just do my research on what migraine is, all the literature that I was reading, not one of them connected it to nutrition, really, but it connected to glucose in a very indirect way. It explained that when you eat glucose, basically your cells, when glucose enters the cells, sodium and water leave. And the rest of the studies that I have done on migraine all told me that sodium channels were a problem in migraine. I said, wait a minute. And there was an article that said that migraineurs excrete in the urine 50% more sodium than other people do. And I said, okay, so if migraineurs are salt wasters and we are talking about this is some glucose connection, then maybe there is some in there. And I started to then get involved, literally learning from the bottom up, reading all kinds of textbooks, articles, you name it, everything, because biochemistry, biology, physiology, neurology, you name it, all had, neurology I was familiar with because that was part of my dissertation, but the rest of it I wasn't. And so it sort of kind of dragged me into the rabbit hole, so to speak. And I understood and connected the dots. And that was very difficult because the literature is out there. It's just that everybody is working in a subfield. And so they get stuck within that subfield and then they don't see out of it. And so I'm not in any subfield in particular. And I have a strong ability. I'm a mathematician otherwise. I have a strong ability to connect the dots. And so that's how I came up with the connection of nutrition and migraine, particularly salt and migraine. And I started off with salt. It didn't start with the nutrition. The nutrition sort of kind of added up as I discovered that, yes, in fact, if I took salt, my migraine went away. Then why did it go away? And how can I make sure that it doesn't go away? And if it went away, then what to do about it? So it kind of sort of morphed. And even the Facebook migraine group that I started by now over 8 years ago didn't initially start with carbohydrate restriction. It just started with salt. And then it sort of kind of grew over the years. And I think by the second year, we restricted carbohydrates and grains and everything else. So it took some time to get there.
Mm-hmm. So in your little synopsis that you wrote about your talk, you say that, just going low carb is often not enough for migraines. Right. Is that more looking at obviously sodium, or there must be so many other factors that come into it as well?
Right. There are other factors because you can increase sodium in a low carb. And actually, most people are advised in a ketogenic, particularly to increase the sodium, but still, they will still have migraines because it isn't just the sodium and it's not just the nutrition, but it's also, I suppose I could say it in the order in which you do it. So there are many people who, for example, from migraine space, jump into the ketogenic diet and then they end up continuing having migraines or have even worse migraines. Some jump into fasting territory, for example. That's an absolute no-go for a migraine. I mean, it's a guaranteed migraine. So there are some little caveats that I had to sort of kind of figure out, and that came by experience, and not just by my experience, but of course, by now over 12,000 people in there. And so little experiences sort of added as aha, so this is also, like, for example, I had an infection. This was like about 6 years ago, and I just started ketogenic diet at that time. And they put me on, I think it was prednisone, and there was something with my heart, so I went on some heart medication. And I had a tremendous interaction between ketosis and the heart medicine. And it took 3 doctors. It was 2 cardiologists, one of my cardiologists and a friend cardiologist who an emergency doctor, and Dr. Steve, Feeney, by email, figuring out that it was that heart drug that caused the interaction. And so I had to actually come off of that heart drug, which was just for temporary for that reason. And so then I discovered that there's also interaction between medications and ketosis. And so ketosis for a migrainer who may be up to 40 medications. I mean, some of the people coming into my group are on 40, 50 medications. And so there's no way that I will let them go on the ketogenic diet. I mean, they have to avoid ketosis with a fire, because that can cause very serious interactions, because most medications are designed to go half-life and excrete from the body through certain processes that assume a glucose metabolic process.
Wow. Well, you said a few things in there I haven't even, the fasting thing, had no idea that if you had migraines, that was a no-go. And then just what you said there, I mean, most people don't even understand what metabolic health means, let alone then you talk about all these interactions and how, what a real journey, really, it must be for someone to face, managing their migraines with anything other than Nurofen and medication and things like that.
Well, with the medications, it doesn't even work because they don't work.
Yeah.
There's no medication for migraine. There's one that they claim for migraine preventive, the CGRP inhibitors, which are injections that have half-life. Like they get the injection once or twice a month, but even they don't prevent migraine. It's just a pain sensory sensitivity that they remove. But then you get those receptors all over the body, so it can cause lots of damage. So there are no migraine medications. There's just simply none.
What important work you do. And the other thing I love what you say is that, the collective wisdom that you bring, with 12,000 people and more, I would imagine that, you've learned from that, you've seen what's worked in them. And that's what I love about all the women that are talking in the summit. They're not just coming from their own, they're bringing with them that collective wisdom. And you can't put a price on that. It's just so important. So the other thing I wanted to ask you, which is obviously getting into what your talk is around the summit. So it is a women's health summit. And you say that women and migraines, women are generally the ones that suffer from migraines more.
Right. And that's fascinating. Now, this is entirely my theory. And so there's no proof. Nobody is trying to get some articles to prove can't. But I think it's quite reasonable to assume that part of the migraine, which I actually is not a hypothesis, that is part of the articles everywhere, that basically there is an association of more sensory neurons in the brain for a migrainer. Sensory neurons are the ones that, for example, if you go in a field and you watch animals, wild animals, they're going to have heightened hearing, heightened sight. Something is going to be more sensitized so they can discover the predators. And so we humans come from there. We didn't have doors and houses and cars and whatever for millions of years. I mean, we do for the past thousands of years, but not before. And so we have an evolutionary ingrained ability to detect our environment really good. We don't use that today so much, but it seems to me that the migraine brain is an ancient brain, and we still have these tuned these neurons so we can sense our predators stronger. But if you compare men and women in the ancestral way of living, the women and children, and that's why children also are more vulnerable to migraine, because women and children usually they were the foragers, right? And the males were going off hunting. Well, if I am a lion or a tiger or a bear or any other animal that is trying to attack another animal to eat it, who am I going to attack? The one who's running with a weapon together with several others ready to kill, or the one that is squatting over a field with some tools to dig the soil? So clearly I'm going to attack those who are more vulnerable. So the children and women who stayed at home and tended the fields, did the laundry or cooking or whatever else they did, they were not hunting and they were not running with the weapons. And so they were not as threatening to the predators. So they were more vulnerable. And so they had to have their central, the nervous system that is associated with the sensory neurons, that had to be more enhanced. And so I'm suspecting that being a woman per se predisposes us to have more sensory neurons in general. And we do know that women tend to have more sensitivities in general. And it's not because we are more sensitive, we just simply sense the same things more than other people do. And so being a migraineur, given that we know that migraineurs have more of these sensory neurons and more connections and they work differently, then I can assume that this is a genetic trait, how we used to be, and that migraineurs today are still migraineurs because they haven't adapted. And those who are not migraineurs, those are the ones who have adapted the more modern lifestyle of being able to eat carbohydrates. And so if we haven't adapted, then we will have still maintained the difference between the men and the women, and of course the children, in that our brain is more sensitized. Now, I do work with a lot of males as well. So it's not to say that it's just females, but generally speaking, I would say that it has an ancestrally way of why women are more sensitive.
I love that. It makes so much sense, honestly, doesn't it? And it's just an area that is so fascinating. I think when you delve, when you understand humans and where we've come from, I mean, really, that stuff can teach us so much about how things work today. But that kind of turns it around. It's sort of like, oh, we think, if we're suffering from something like that, there's something wrong. But maybe it's just that, it's just super, super right.
Exactly. And it's based really upon our circumstance, right? So context matters. So if I am about to be eaten by a lion, then having a hypersensory brain is fantastic. It's saving my life. Whereas a person who is not a migraineur may not know. And just as a tiger is about to jump at them, it's too late. Well, I'm already 2 miles away. And so there are some definite benefits. Whether that's useful today or not is another question. And so why we get the pain? Because obviously, if it always came with the pain, it would not have been a beneficial element. But at that time, it didn't come with a pain because we didn't eat carbohydrates. So the only difference really today is we have a lot more of this sensory stimulus. We have light, we have cars, we have lots of people. We have a lot of noise and sound and light around us all the time, which we didn't have then. And then on top of it, we now eat a food which is known to disrupt the electrolytes and to remove sodium from us. And then that's the whole hypothesis of the brain with migraine, is that we need more sodium. So for a migraine brain, all this good life can cause trouble.
Fascinating. So if people sign up, and it's not just for women, obviously. So if people sign up to the summit, what will they walk away from knowing after they've watched your presentation?
Well, a couple of things. First, they will have a little better understanding of the difference between migraine and headaches, because everybody thinks of migraine as headache, which it isn't, because we also have migraines without headaches. So it's not a defining feature. Yes, many of us have headaches as well, but that's not the migraine. That's just one symptom. So they're going to learn the difference. They will also learn what a migraine actually is. They will also understand this hypothesis of the women are more sensitive and why, and also children. So that can also boys in their pre-puberty state or puberty state, they're very vulnerable. So it's going to, they outgrow it often. So they're going to learn that as well. And then they're going to learn also what to eat, what not to eat, and how much salt or when to take salt. And of course, not everything could fit into that presentation. And so I'm also giving the information of where they can meet me and how they can join like the Facebook class, not class, I'm calling it a class. Everybody calls it the Facebook University, Migraine University on Facebook. But so that is completely free. So everybody can join, and we help everybody, no matter where they are. It's completely international, 24/7, because somebody's always online. And so I'm giving a lot of information and also where to find us and how to get help.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, not just if you're a sufferer, but if you treat people that come to you or if you're a doctor or a dietitian or anyone in the space and you've got someone that suffers from migraines, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to have some information to actually give them that will
And
hopefully lead them to help.
And I do work with many doctors, and many doctors send their migraineurs to my group. And in fact, I do have many doctors in my group. They're not participating. They may be asking questions privately aside, or they may send me a blood test that they don't know how to look at, because migraineurs are very different, even in the interpretation of their blood test. And so I do work with a lot of doctors. And so there's no problem there. So we are getting a lot of support. Of course, there are doctors who don't support us at all and actually make fun of the migraineurs for even being with us or try to talk them out. And there's nothing I can do there. But we have now an increasing number of very positive experiences with doctors. So that's great too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there's been a few little comments here. Great discussion from Joan, and this is so important. And Angela Stanton rocks. Yes, absolutely, she does. And it's such a gift to know you, Angela. I'm so grateful to the Nutrition Network for connecting us and for the work you do and having the opportunity to share it far and wide. So thank you for talking with me today and being part of the summit.
Well, thank you. Likewise, I'm very happy to have met you and to be part of your channel of working with people. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.